Hi everybody, today's special guest is Gareth Weaver-Taylor. Gareth, how are you doing?
Yep, really good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. It's not as sunny as it was yesterday. So we are inside today, at least for the morning part of today, and we'll see what happens in the afternoon.
Yeah, unfortunately, it depends which way you look at it. Yesterday was a very, very, very nice day, which makes today maybe not quite as nice, but actually for the northeast, let's be honest, it's probably still a very nice day.
Yeah, and that's where we get balance, don't we, within everything. You know, you have one good day, you have one bad day, maybe you have one average day, and it evens itself out somewhere. Gaz, can you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, in terms of your career a little bit and how you managed to get to Durham University?
Wow, yeah, interesting journey to the northeast to now become head of hockey for Durham University Hockey Club. Been in post unbelievably 6 years now. Can you believe that already? 6 years. Yeah, grew up on the Isle of Wight, so I'm a long way from home. I was born in Birmingham, but my mum took me down to the island to be with some family down there. I was on the island for until I was 18. Only really picked up hockey when I was about 15. Really, it was a high school on the Isle of Wight. There's sort of three-tiered: primary, middle, and high school. So only really got into hockey when I moved to high school. Basketball was my main sport, really, and kind of ended up floating across to hockey. Went to Liverpool John Moores University, where I did my coaching science degree. Went to freshers trials like most people do, and within about 20 minutes I was the player coach of the men's first team at Liverpool John Moores. Very different standard to what obviously I'm involved in now from a Durham University perspective, but my first taste of coaching. Within 2 weeks I was also coaching the women's first team as well. Very fantastic academic background for me going to John Moores and the coaching science degree, but actually being able to practically apply it. As my 3-year degree came to an end, I decided to do a master's in sports psychology. Look, all of the sports science domains, I'm a big believer in all of them. But in reality, sports psychology was the one that I felt as a coach I could implement on a day-to-day basis. Not saying biomechanics isn't important to sport, hugely important, but a little bit more difficult practically to be able to put that into everyday practice. And at the same time as starting my master's, at the age of 21, I became National League head coach for Brooklands over in Manchester. So 3 times a week I was going over to Brooklands to coach them in the National League. Really successful first season, got promoted to National 1. Not so successful second season, and was shown the door at that point. At the age of 23, I was already being sacked, and at that point moved across to Sheffield and coached with a good friend of yours, actually, a guy called Andy Bradshaw at Sheffield. I was his assistant for a couple of years. Subsequently took over from him, was at Sheffield for about 8 years. Whilst having normal day jobs as well as doing the coaching. It wasn't full time at that point. I was working part time for the hockey club, doing some development work. Eventually got a day proper job, as my mum would call it, at Leeds University, where I was a sports development officer, commuting from Sheffield to Leeds. And then after 5 years at Leeds, I went down to Nottingham Trent University, whereas I was the assistant director of sport. Where I coached Beeston women in the Premier League as well, which was a fantastic opportunity. I was all geared up for being there for probably 3-5 years, and then suddenly Quentin Sloper, the head of sport at Durham University, gave me a phone call, and we had a chat about whether coming up to Durham might be an option for me, and interviewed for the role. And yeah, 6 years ago, moved up here. Wife's family all from Durham, so it was definitely a family move to get up here and start a family, which we've now thankfully got, with 2 children, the dog, and all the family, Amy's family all around us. And at the same time of all of that happening, I kind of went from Wales 16s head coach through Wales 18s, 21 boys, moved across to England 18s girls, England under 21 girls for about 5 years, 2 junior World Cups, a couple of Europeans, GB development program, and then most recently spent 3 years with Wales senior women as their assistant coach, 2 Europeans and a Commonwealth Games. And yeah, here we are.
You're only 24.
Yeah, no, I'm still 24, thanks. Unfortunately, a bit old now.
Yeah, we've known each other for 6 years now, haven't we? And I came to Durham, joined Durham in terms of my consultancy role there at the same time that you joined, and we had a tipping point moment with you, didn't we? And it was it August, September time? I can't remember the month.
I think it might be the famous November. I think
Okay.
if you're talking about, I think you're talking about, which is maybe when I look even worse than what I do right now.
Yeah, do you want to tell everybody about that if you don't mind? If you're quite happy sharing that one, because it was quite, for me, it was a really a fun moment, a really interesting moment, and a moment that I guess in terms of our relationship certainly changed the dynamics a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, in my first year when I was at Durham and I took over from a really good friend of mine, Lewis Butcher, I was running the men's and the women's program on my own. So I was running the 2 National League programs on a Saturday, women, Sunday, men, traveling all over the place. Wednesday, obviously, university box competition in the top tier, men and women, huge club, but everything was done on my own. And November is a pretty, I mean, everybody who works in higher education will tell you November is a pretty dark month for most people, because it is getting very dark and you're on the pitch when it's dark in the morning and you're on the pitch when it's dark at night time. I think it's fair to say that my battery was not particularly charged but at this moment in time. And you famously, obviously, saw me at this point and may have referred to me not looking my best, shall we say. I think I can't swear at this time because it's not 9 o'clock yet. But yeah, some swear words in there that I didn't look particularly great. And from then on in, it was about how we work together to get the best out of me, to get the best out of the athletes.
Yeah, and everything that I've always said to you is that you need to look after yourself first in order to look after your athletes. And it is that old aeroplane analogy, isn't it? That if the oxygen mask drops, you have to put it on yourself first before you can help everybody else. And we had that conversation about, how do you get back to your A game in order for you to, maximize the potential of the players that you had on the pitch?
Yeah, and it's a hard one for me, and even now it's still a battle because of my relationships with my players are so crucial to my philosophy and what I do, and I always want the best for them to help them, inspire them and fulfill their potential. So I'm always trying to help them, and subsequently, yeah, I probably come down the order somewhat, but yeah, I'm probably not bottom of the pile, but I'm still certainly not top of the pile. And it's like anything in life, you have to work at these things, and I've been doing things a certain way for a number of years, and now I'm desperately trying to keep working on myself to make sure I'm recharged. This little period of lockdown certainly helping to reset a lot of things because you've got time on your hands.
I'm glad you mentioned philosophy there, Gaz, because the one thing I see in terms of the difference between people in business, education, sport who are being successful on a day-to-day basis and have successful careers, and those who are just fall a little bit short, tends to be a philosophy. They kind of know a little bit about themselves. They know what they're about, but they also know what the journey should look like. And you've always had a strong philosophy, and it hasn't necessarily changed much since in the 6 years that I've seen. You've got some real strong values within there as well. Do you want to just talk about a couple of them?
Yeah, I think the reason why your philosophy helps you is because in the environment that I work in, we're constantly tested, whether it's an athlete testing you, whether it's an opposition testing you, senior management testing you. You're always being tested by your philosophy, and having a really strong philosophy allows you to come back to that when you're not sure. Should I go A or should I go B? And for me, having that strong philosophy always allows me to come back and go, well, okay, I'm being tested, but these are the things that are absolutely crucial to me. For example, in terms of my philosophy, my relationships with whoever I'm working with, whether it's my support staff, assistant coaches, my players, senior management, relationships are really, really important. And they are built on 2 things, which is honesty and trust. And you have those, like, straight away, fresher walks through the door. I show them my philosophy in our intro meeting because it's that important to me. Everybody knows you've got it. You have the trust. But if you lose it, then it's hard to regain it. And people are very clear on that. And I'm very clear on that. And I think having that, it's a 2-way balance, because people say, well, which one comes first? And it's very difficult to say, well, trust comes first and then you're honest. but some people can say, well, you're honest first, and then that's how you get the trust. And I do think they're embedded within each other. But me being able to be honest with an athlete and an athlete being able to be honest with me allows us to have trust, which then allows us to have more honesty with each other. And ultimately, my big philosophy is around trying to help them and inspire them to fulfill their potential. That's what the program at Durham Uni Hockey Club does. It's about helping individuals fulfill their potential. And that's not necessarily even their hockey ability or potential. That is maybe their academic side of things that I have to sometimes occasionally help with. Just for the record, not actually answering their academic questions because they're way brainier than I am. But it's sometimes lifestyle. The 18 to 21, 22 is such an interesting age group to work with because they're not children anymore, but they probably haven't got all the skills that perhaps adults have. And it's a really, really, I find it brilliant. I've worked in higher education. I've never left higher education. And I find it an absolute fascinating age group to work with. But yeah, trust, honesty around the relationship, inspiring them is really key to me. And then, as I said, for me, it's also about the learning environment. And we talk about it a lot, don't we? Joining the dots. I think that's a really important bit of what we do. No one aspect is more important, whether it's tactical, technical, psychological, lifestyle. All of them have to be embedded into the program. And that's where I think we've had a lot of joy over the last 6 years with allowing individuals like, I know you've interviewed Tess Howard, Kerry-Ann Hastings, allowing people like that to fulfill their potential. That's the joy I get out of my role. And not just the superstars either, because everybody can go, yeah, but they're internationals. I can tell you about a goalkeeper, Chris Hogg. It's one of my favourite stories. Hoggy turned up as a fresher, hadn't played much in goal, couldn't get in the fifth team. And I kind of like, Hoggy, stick around, train with us, be part of it. And he embraced it, we embraced him. And say, unfortunately, 2 seasons ago, Ollie Payne, our number 1 goalkeeper, got injured. And Hoggy was our number 2 by this point. He was a third year by this point, and he worked his way up from not being in the club to the 5th team, to the 4th team, to the 3rd team, to the 2nd team. And Payno got injured, and Hoggy's now our National League goalkeeper, and Hoggy's playing National League hockey for us. And to be honest with you, those stories give me just as much joy as listening to your interview the other day with Kerry-Ann Hastings, who was saying about her mindset and how that had helped her. So she's always had those technical, tactical ability of a hockey player, but the bit that joined her dots up was the work that we did together around her mindset to get that right on the pitch with me and off the pitch with you. So for me, that learning environment and joining the dots is hugely important to my philosophy as well.
Cool, thanks for that, Gaz. Couple of things. One, I'm glad you mentioned academics, and we're all in isolation at the moment, and the environment that we're trying to do some homeschooling is a bit of an interesting one. So yesterday I spent some time with Jessica doing some of her science homework, and we sat down, we had to be quite patient, we had to communicate with each other a little bit, and eventually after 10 to 15 minutes, actually, I got some of the answers right. So she's helped me out quite a lot. But yeah, academically, you know, we're in a university where we're bringing in some really intelligent people to start off with, and their future careers outside of sport is going to be quite huge. The other thing which I thought was quite interesting in that little chat there, Gaz, was around your honesty. Honesty is a value that I think everybody wants to have. So I work with very few organizations that kind of go, yeah, I want to be dishonest, please. Is that possible? I obviously don't do a lot of work with the criminal service, but although I do a lot of work with the police. But honesty for me has always been a real strange one, because I don't know whether we like honesty. And we certainly, can we be 100% honest in terms of what we're thinking and also what comes out of our mouths? And I don't know whether, because I think you are quite honest. And I don't know whether that's because of your D profile, in terms of the fact that you can feel like you can be more honest than other people because your dominant profile just says it how it is. And if somebody's doing really, really badly, you will tell them exactly how badly that they're doing to the nth degree, where other people probably will be a little bit more politically honest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. And it isn't easy, because sometimes you're telling people things that they don't want to hear. But that's what makes them better. and equally sometimes you're telling them what they do want to hear, and that makes them better. And it's a constant choice about what you decide to share with an individual to help them on their journey. And sometimes, yes, because of my high D profile, in terms of the DIS model, yes, it is a bit direct in terms of the communication, and it's a journey for them across their 3 years as just as much as it's a journey for me with them across their 3 years. And some individuals, because of their profiles, I might have to be a little bit more careful with how honest I am in their first 6 weeks of pre-season. But by the time they're a Kerry Ann and you've been working with them for, well, I mean, I've worked with Kerry Ann for 2 years now, but I knew Kerry Ann before that as well, through the Scotland programme. So I kind of had a bit of a relationship with her prior to her being it. I can be a little bit more honest with her than I can do with an 18-year-old fresher who's just moved from home. And yeah, there's a lot on their plate. And that's part of my building of a relationship with them, so that they learn to trust me that, okay, sometimes Gaz is going to be direct, and that's okay. And again, I'm very fortunate. I have some incredible leaders who are around me, in terms of my leadership groups, my captains, my vice captains, however the team decides they want to have that leadership team, who also help the younger ones or less experienced ones understand sometimes how Gaz operates, and that sometimes Gaz can be a little bit honest about how he is with you in terms of your playing. But we then, we can have some really good dialogue then around what we've spoken about, so that the athlete understands. And often you then see them go out and go, okay, well, I know where I stand. I think everybody in life wants to know where they sit and where they stand. And I think sometimes we're too afraid to be able to just say, listen, Graham, I'm really sorry. I don't think you're a very good psychologist, or Graham, I think you're a fantastic psychologist. People are too afraid to tell people when they're good, because it's not just honesty about, people would go, oh, he's just honest when it's not good. No, when it's good, I'll tell you that it's good. But when you need to improve, and there's areas that we need to address, and let's be clear, it's not me just saying to them, right, go away and do this. I'm here. We are all, whether it's you, me, Luke, the S&C, Ryan, Physio, Jamie, Claire, Sarah, Tebsy, all the coaching team that we have around us at Durham. I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of people around me, is that we all work together to try and help that individual. But if they don't know what they need to improve, then how can we help them fulfill their potential? We can't.
And it's great us having this conversation now, because it's really topical at the moment. Everybody's watching The Last Dance. Everybody's thinking about Michael Jordan. I was actually in the States back end of the 80s and early 90s, and not seeing him live, but getting to see what came with the Bulls at that time. And Michael was very dominant, but he was a winner. He was a winner. And now people are saying, well, actually, was he too dominant? Was he a bit of a bully, But actually, in reflection to what he won, and also reflection to the timeline and his personality trait, we know what it's like in terms of being at the top end of performance. And you have to have that little bit extra, don't you? You have to step over the line sometimes. You have to be a little bit more honest, a little bit stronger sometimes if you're going to get the win, because it can come down to one shot. And Jordan's famous quote about how many shots he's missed, on game-winning shots is incredible. But look at what he won. So I think it's quite a good topical conversation, that we're looking at personality traits, we're looking at drivers, we're looking at communication, but we're also looking at that word honesty and what it really means.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm probably one of the few people in the world that haven't watched The Last Dance yet, because we don't have Netflix. So anybody watching this that's got a spare Netflix account, please. And there's a massive, I grew up, like you were saying, I grew up with Bulls. I've got my Jordan top still up in the loft from when I was younger. So, Jordan's everything in terms of basketball for me. And he wasn't my favourite player. It might not surprise you, but Dennis Rodman was actually my favourite player, not for his off-court antics, shall we say, more of the on-court. I love his defensive intensity that he brought to every game was one of the reasons why they were so successful. And I think sometimes people miss that defensive arm of what the Bulls had, because Jordan was and Scottie Pippen was so good offensively. But I think it's a really interesting one with Michael Jordan, and his dominance and how much he drove that team. And I think you need somebody in there that does that. And if they had 5 of them, yeah, it probably wouldn't work. It probably wouldn't work. You'd have, you know, constant fight every day. I think as a society now, we're a little bit afraid of people putting themselves out there that they want to win. And culturally, we've obviously got to a point now where in society, a lot of it is about taking part. And it is about taking part, 100%. I want every kid to play hockey. I want every kid to play sport or do music or do violin, like whatever their passion is. The reason I probably already coming through on this is that I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I'm lucky to do what I do, but I'm passionate about it. And I've got some players in both my women's and men's teams that are very similar to me. They're very passionate, very dominant individuals. But equally, you've got some brilliant nurturers, like my women. Kerry Ann, who you met the other day, and Ellie Rawnsley, who kind of co-captains for the women's first team. Brilliant combination, absolutely brilliant. Did we know it was going to work as well as it did? Of course we didn't. We had a chat about it. We looked at their psychological profiles, and we thought it might work. And it's even that one's interesting around. You talk about culture, because that's the first time in Durham University Hockey Club's history that we've had a joint captaincy. I tried to do it about 3 years ago and got told that's not what Durham does. And I was like, okay, sorry. But the evolution of where we are today is more acceptable. Would Michael Jordan's way of being now be accepted maybe in some sports with mental health checks like the UK Sport conduct? Maybe as a player, maybe not as a coach. He might not get away with it from a coaching perspective, but he possibly might still get away with it. And for me, it's about embracing all of them. It's not saying Michael Jordan's way of being is better than any other basketball player who might be a high S profile and prefers the steadiness, the security, the safety, is more of a nurturing leader. You certainly look at someone like Steve Kerr, who's very different to the way Jordan was, but that's probably why he won 4 NBA championships in 4 consecutive years, because he did something different to what Jordan did. If he tried to do what Jordan did, he probably wouldn't be in the team. He would have been traded to somewhere else, but he fitted that part that they needed in the same way they needed someone like Rodman. He fitted the part. I'm not sure what psychological profiling Rodman would be, but let's go with high I because he likes a party. But they needed that, because otherwise it would have been too intense the whole time. If you had 5 Jordans, it would be too intense. But then suddenly Jordan turns up with a new hairstyle and a ring through his nose and his ear and his nipple, and suddenly they're all laughing probably at the same time as Jordan's trying to make them do another double doggy. That's the complexity of what we work in, is that we're not talking about one individual. When you talk about Jess Ennis's team around her, it's all for Jess because she's one individual. When you talk about basketball, you're talking about, I know there's 5 on the court, but there's probably another 7 players on the bench. And with hockey, it's not even the 11 that start the game, it's the 16, it's the 20. We use 24 first team players this year, both men and women. How do you keep 24 people all happy? Well, it's all of what we've just talked about. There's some people like me, there's some people like you, and you need that in every team.
And that's where I think the word clarity really springs out for me, is we have to have clarity. You have to have clarity of who you are as an individual. You have to know your strengths. You also have to know your limitations. And then you have to map that within a team, because actually everybody's going to have strengths and everybody's going to have some limitations or areas of work, depends on how politically you want to put that. But once you understand that, then you're able to thrive a little bit more. The problem that I see in the majority of people that I work with who don't take that next step is they're too worried. They're too worried to really look at who they are and find their strengths and weaknesses. And then what they're too worried about is then actually going and working on them. So they'll work on the things that make them look really good. So Jordan will work on that air dunk that he does, and Scottie Pippen will work on his assists to Jordan to make him look good, and Rodman will work on his rebounds. But there's all kinds of things that you need to work on to make you a better person, that makes you a better basketball player, makes you a better hockey player, makes you a better coach. And that's where that fear zone comes in a little bit, because we don't acknowledge it, because the clarity isn't really there. We don't see how it's going to help me a little bit.
Yeah, really interesting reading some stuff from Johnny Wilkinson's coach, Dave Aldred, and a few others at the moment. And I totally agree with you that we need to be honest about where somebody's strengths are, and also the possibilities. Like, I didn't know, hand on heart, I mean, Kerry Ann has been, you saw Kerry Ann and Tess, and that's why I used them. Um, when they turned up, I had no idea of the possibility of what they could become. I saw strengths, and they have some really, really good assets. You know, Tess's individual 1v1 ability is fantastic. Did I think within 18 months that she could be in that Olympic program? I thought she would be at some point, possibly not 18 months. I saw the possibility. And so we started to identify where were the areas that she needed to potentially improve, because I don't like the word weakness, because I think something that maybe is a weakness, sometimes you should just leave on a shelf and work on your strengths to make them super strengths. I'm a big believer in that. But equally, the possibilities that sometimes that we see, you can't predict it, but you can try and sell to the athlete, listen, Kerry Ann, we can see the possibility that you can hit a ball from a 16 straight to our centre forward, and that centre forward's going to score. Or no, I can't. You know, fear zone kicks in, and that again, that's me being honest with her that we can see that possibility. So is that a bad thing, being honest? I think people think honesty sometimes is just, oh, you're rubbish. No, that's not helpful. The honesty is, oh my goodness, I think you can take that shot on. I think you can take that pass on, and giving them the belief that they can do it. And when it's rubbish and it doesn't work, and she comes off and goes, yeah, that was rubbish. You go, yeah, it was on this one, but we'll try again. And the next time it might come off. And so, yeah, for me, I'm a big believer in trying to see what their potential is. Because I don't think often they believe how good they could be. And again, that's not just about a first team becoming an international, which I'm lucky to work with. It might be a second team player trying to become a first team player. It could be a third team. I mean, we've seen another great example for me, Freddie Foster. Do you remember Freddie Foster? So Freddie Foster, when the Durham men's first team won the box championship in 2018 for the first time in 20 odd years, it was a ridiculous stat. And Freddie Foster didn't even come to a pre-season in his first year. He just rocked up to freshers trials that he wasn't even going to come to. And again, I saw him on that day. I remember it now. He was wearing some Kent shorts, cricketer. I was like, this guy's got something. I can see something. And he played third team for a few weeks and in the second team. And I remember at the last action of his second year, he got to play for the first team. And we were down in London doing some prep for our playoffs, because we'd won the National League that year and we're going to playoffs to try and get into the Premier League. So we were down at London training at Olympic Park where we were playing, and we had a couple of injuries in the one. So we were playing Holcombe, very, very good team, lots of Olympians. And Freddie lived on the other side of London. He was back home, obviously, for Easter. And we rang him up and said, Freddie, any chance you can get across? No problem. So bless him, and great commitment from him. And again, in terms of philosophy, commitment, if I was to try and sum up my culture, it's a commitment culture. That's what we do. Freddie, over he comes, London. Okay, who we're playing tonight? Holcombe, brilliant. Yeah, and he ended up man marking Barry Middleton. Now Barry, you might not know, but Barry's like the most famous hockey player in this country. I think it's on like 4 or 5 Olympics. I mean, he's a legend, an absolute legend. And Freddie Foster, 2 years ago, didn't even come to pre-season. He was a fresher turning up to freshers trials, and he ends up marking Barry Middleton. Now, I saw that possibility. I saw that potential. And ultimately, the year after, when we won the box championship, he was vice captain. And that's another great story in terms of the leadership development of someone like Freddie. And Freddie Freddie's actually doing a PhD now at Oxford. So it tells you from an academic perspective what he's all about. And yeah, just an incredible, incredible guy. And it's just seeing that possibility and that potential in somebody that they might not see themselves.
Yeah, and that potential for me is if you join the dots between clarity and honesty, and they understand where they are, but they see it, and then they believe in it themselves. And I think one of the hardest things I ever see with people who I work with is that they're reluctant to look in the mirror and be honest with themselves. It doesn't matter where the honesty is coming from, but until you can have the clarity internally and you can be honest with yourself, then there's going to be no change in behavior. I think I used the term last week in one of the Durham talks was until the need to change becomes greater than the need to stay the same, nothing will happen. You will just continue being who you are. You will play with some things, but when it matters, you will just go back to type. And that's the fear, because you haven't really acknowledged and you haven't been clear with yourself in terms of that honesty about, I need to change, or I want to change, because it's better than staying where I am now. But staying where you are is that fear zone or that comfort zone, and you're stuck.
Yeah, I was going to say that it sometimes is a comfort as well, because it's easier to stay in here and stay in this environment, in my nice little bubble, without actually going, okay, well, I'm going to sort of open myself up and be vulnerable. I do, lots of us do. You put yourself in vulnerable positions a lot of the time and places, but that's when you learn. That's the exciting bit. That's where you grow and become better. And blimey, at 18 years of age, when I was doing my BTEC in sports science at the Isle of Wight College, did I ever think I was going to be at Durham University as head of hockey full time? No, but I've put myself constantly in challenges that are hard. And I don't want to mislead people. It's not an easy journey, and it's not an easy journey for these athletes that I've been naming recently in this video. It's hard, and you take knocks and you fall down and you get back up again. And success is not linear. It doesn't start at A and end at Z. It's constant ups, downs, and there's loads of quotes out there about it's about how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up again. But it genuinely is true. It's not easy, but that's the same in life. That's the same in life.
It is, and one of the things which I work with people who are not necessarily in the world of sport is having a life philosophy. Because you have a coaching philosophy, but people tend not to have a life philosophy. Now, if you think having a philosophy to being a coach is a really good thing, how come you don't necessarily have a philosophy in terms of your life or your business or your kids? And that's something that I really work with a lot of people on, trying to understand that actually you can't just say, well, there's my coaching philosophy, and then forget every other aspect of my life kind of stuff, because actually we need to have a life philosophy, and some of the things certainly link. But Gaz, that's a great opportunity for me with you talking about ups and downs and pathways there regarding successes to kind of just have a conversation with you about some of your successes. And obviously you had a really good international career with some junior teams, and then that led you to an opportunity to coach at the Commonwealth Games. How was that? And what did you learn from that?
I mean, the Commonwealth Games, it's a really interesting one for working with Wales for that 3-year period with a very, very good friend of mine, Kevin Johnson, who I had worked with England under 21s prior to then moving across to Wales. It's an interesting one because we would probably see, as an outcome perspective, the Europeans are more important to us, because trying to get up into the A division of Europe and playing against the Germans, the Dutch, it is probably more outcome based than, say, the Commonwealth Games was. But obviously the Commonwealth Games, it's the show. I mean, there's just so much noise around you, and I don't mean just literal noise, but the village life is completely different to anything you ever experience at a Europeans or any other tournament. Being at a multi-sports games is very different, and it was a real learning journey about trying to limit the distraction and the noises and what other people were doing. So we made the decision. We went to the opening ceremony the night before our first game. So our first game was against India, way higher ranked than us in the world, and the opening ceremony does take a lot out of you. You're standing around for ages, you're waiting for ages, you're distracted, there's just so many things going on, and yeah, it was a real big decision, which it wasn't my decision. It was Kevin, who's the head coach's final decision, but again, in conjunction with the leadership team. Wales are in a very different position. The girls pay to play for their country. They pay a lot of money to have to do what they do. And the opening ceremony is like, I mean, again, I didn't know because I've never done it, but the opening ceremony is like nothing ever you're going to experience. You go out into a stadium with 20,000 people all clapping, cheering, Wales flags everywhere, and it was just phenomenal. And for us to take that away from them just because we played India at 9:30 the next day, these girls pay thousands of pounds every year to play for their country, and they felt that it was a big deal for them to go to the opening ceremony. But it was all things like that was just very different to being at a Europeans or a home nations or anything else that I've ever done in my life. Was just so many distractions. And hockey, you start on the first day of the Commonwealth Games, and the hockey runs all the way through to the end point. Whereas some of the boxers, for example, they fight on day one of the Commonwealth Games and they're done. And then they are, there's some obviously interesting stories then that what happens around the village for the next couple of weeks. But we've obviously got another game to prepare for, and we've got to go again and go again. And I mean, the memory of beating, we then went on to beat India famously the next day, and beating India 3-2. And it's the first time Wales senior women have ever beaten India. To do that and be part of that was ridiculously special. And it's just a phenomenal experience. And we unfortunately, one of our girls got injured. So when we went over there, so we played a few warm-up games when we were over there, and unfortunately one of our girls got injured, and we had to make the really difficult decision that, well, she couldn't be part of the Commonwealth Games, so she had to be removed from the village, and we had to bring another athlete into the village. And things like that are really tough, like really tough. You think that's it's an easy decision, just do it, and you got to get one in and one out. But you've got a situation where you have to hand over kit, change rooms. It's a really, really it was tough emotionally, very emotionally draining, being part of such a big tournament rather than normally you're in your closed little hockey European tournament. Even though outcome wise we finished where we were ranked in the world, so there's 10 teams at the Commonwealth Games, and we finished 9th. We wanted to do, after getting off to such a good start against India, we wanted to find that next win that might have got us into the 5v6 match. But from an outcome perspective, there was no huge pressure on us from an outcome perspective, only the pressure that we put on ourselves that we wanted to finish as high as possible. But the emotional pressure that surrounded the games, that was rather big.
I'm glad you said that about emotionally draining, because we've always checked in a little bit when you've been on international duty in a variety of different competitions. And I can remember vividly the little kind of WhatsApp messages that were going back and forward after the Commonwealth Games, just before you took that little holiday and break, which was well deserved. And you were absolutely drained. And it was that November time moment 6 years ago back in Durham, but with a suntan.
Yeah, slightly nicer weather, and it's even things like the guys that I work with. I'm very fortunate. I love the guys that I was working with, but you're sharing basically a room with 3 other men we were away for something like 3.5. I mean, we won the Bucks final on the Wednesday in Nottingham. I drove back up, and then on the Friday I was off to the Gold Coast, and we were there. Yeah. So it was probably about 3.5 weeks, including the actual pre-bit. And so you live in such a bubble of intensity the whole time. And there's some funny stories that if Kevin, my head coach, was on the line now, he'd probably be able to tell you. But it was it's an intense period to be around the same people. But then, I mean, I was very lucky, as you said. I took the decision. Amy and my little boy Henry, who was 1 and a bit at that stage, they came out and they stayed out, and we went and visited friends in Tasmania and did a bit of traveling around Australia for a couple of weeks afterwards. And that was huge, because normally when a tournament finishes and I come home, it's a really difficult transition. You go from eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're with this team that you're all on this same journey together, and then suddenly out of nowhere you've got nobody. And I say nobody, and I love my family, as you know, very, very much. But it's such a weird experience when you finish a major Europeans or Commonwealth Games or any tournament that you go to, where you're just in that bubble, and then suddenly you're sat at home, and you're not a hotel, so now suddenly you've got cooking comes on the agenda. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, food-wise, Commonwealth Village. If anybody ever gets the chance to go, just go to the dining hall. because literally you have got every type of food you can imagine. It was absolutely phenomenal. But you sat with your team every day, and we were in our pink section because that was the section that our housing was in, and you all have to go to the same place and you put your trays away. But then suddenly you're at home and you've got to cook and you've got to wash up for yourself, and it's a really interesting, again, psychological transition coming back into the real world.
Fab. Thanks, guys, for that. So we've talked about personality traits and emotional intelligence, and we've talked about philosophies. And I guess when you join the dots up to all of those, they become the culture that, as a coach, you want to try to set. They become the culture that you want to live in and you want to breathe in yourself. As the last question, just before you go, that's all right. My thoughts are around the fact that people are talking about this new normal. Not a big fan of the term new normal. Going to the Gold Coast and Commonwealth Games, that was a new normal for you because you'd never been there before. Me moving to Singapore was a new normal to me. So new normals are just transitional periods in our life, I think. But there are going to be some changes going forward, and we're going to have to adapt. So if we look at that, how do you see yourself evolving as a coach in terms of your emotional intelligence through, the current situation that you're in and coming out of that? And any top tips for any players who might be coming to Durham or might be coming to any other university in terms of how they can manage this concept around their emotional intelligence, their personalities, their strengths, and their own personal culture?
Yeah, I mean, really interesting one around the new world. And I think there's two ways you can look at it, and you'll laugh when I say this because you know me pretty well. We can either worry about what this new world is going to look like, or we can look for opportunity and embrace it. None of us know. You don't know. I don't know. Don't even think certain people making decisions know. Like, they just don't know, and that's not fault of them either. We just don't know. And I, hand on heart, as you know very well, I worry a lot about everything. It's my job to worry. And I think where personally, and what I would probably try and recommend is that let's just look for opportunities. So term 3 for us is just about to finish. The students are all in exams. We normally would do hockey during this term to keep the learning going ahead of the next season. But we can't. So do we worry about it? Do I get stressed about the fact that, oh my God, we can't train at the moment? So therefore, I mean, the boys' men's first team have got promoted into the Premier League for the first time in the club's history. So we're going to be, playing the likes of Holcombe, Wimbledon every single week next season. And we're now not able to accelerate their learning in this little term 3 period because we're not together. But we found different ways. So the world of Zoom has suddenly, I didn't even know what Zoom was 8 weeks ago, and now I use it every single day. Well, what a great opportunity, because now you're suddenly sitting there thinking, well, we don't have to be together all the time. I don't have to drag the athletes down to Maiden Castle to train every day. We can do some stuff like me and you are doing here. We can do team talks on a Friday night, or run over a few tactics with the women's first team on a Friday night, rather than them all having to go to one house to be together. So I think yes, it's going to be different, but it could be good. It could be different good. And I think probably for me, let's focus on that it's different good, rather than worrying about different bad, because we don't know. And we just don't.
I love that. That's a great one to finish on, isn't it? Different good. 30 years ago, we had wooden tennis rackets. Different good. 40 years ago, we had to take the horse and cart to work. Different good. TV screens on the wall now, where we had black and white TVs. Evolution is okay. Change is okay. And different good is okay. And I think we get caught up sometimes in the fear, in the worry, in the what if. Well, actually, what if things are better in 2 years' time than they ever have been? What if in 5 years' time we're a much nicer bunch of people on this planet, and we support each other and we have better communities than maybe what we do now? that's a great place to be in. It's certainly a great place I want to be in, and certainly a great place I want my daughter to grow up in as well. So different good. Let's leave it on that, Gaz. It's always a pleasure chatting with you about your philosophy, your coaching experience. There's a fountain of knowledge in that head. I will continue to try to take some of the worries away from you. And so you can just excel and just let some of those genius moments that you have run out. And I am going to finish with one story. And I don't know whether you can remember this, but I think it was maybe the second year, and I was on pitch with you, and we had a little bit of an up and down couple of weeks and stuff like that, and there was a little doubt there was a little fear there, kind of stuff like that, and you empower your players to learn. And I love that about the fact that you'll say, right, solve the problem, off you go. And then you just did something, and instead of then giving them the answer afterwards, you just walked away. And I literally ran half a pitch left, and I just went, that's why you're a good coach, mate. And
I remember. I genuinely remember. I do, yeah.
And we just need to find more moments like that where we get rid of the distortion, we take away the fear and worry, and allow people like yourself and other people as well just to have those moments to flourish, because that's where the excellence of success really lies in my head.
And, the thing for me around that moment was probably my battery being charged. And I think, again, while I think there's so much potential and possibility of good possibilities, is because actually what's happened to us in the last 6, 7, 8 weeks for a lot of people, not everybody, obviously, let's be very clear. There's some people that they will need their break. NHS, for example, we're going to have to find a way over the next 6 months to make sure that we look after them, because you can't keep going at the intensity that they're phenomenal what they're doing at the moment. And I can't, both of us would speak very, very highly of, my wife gave birth 7 weeks ago in a very difficult world that we live in. Obviously, you've got your own situations with your daughter, and they're going to need their recharge break. But a lot of people across the last 8 weeks have had a pretty good recharge period. Like, a lot of batteries are going to be full, and that's exciting. Like, imagine what people could come out when we come out of this. When we come out of this, loads of people are going to have loads of energy. Now, what they decide to put their energy into, well, that's the choice, isn't it? That's back to people. So, for me, I think one thing I've learned in this 8 weeks, I do run on a commitment culture. There's no doubt about that. Commitment is very important to me around the programs that I'm involved in. But actually, yes, there needs to be commitment still to my teams because I love them, but I also love my family, and I've now got 2 children. If you include Brian the dog, that's 3 children. Well, maybe I need a bit more commitment culture around those guys. Henry starts school in September, so for the last 4 years, me and Henry have always had Tuesday together. That's my day off, and because I work at weekends and I have my day with Henry, that was my commitment to him. Well, the commitment's going to have to change slightly, and to my friends that and family that I'm desperate to now see, I want to put more energy into those. So I think that's the exciting things, is we've all had this recharge period, and unlike someone like Pep Guardiola talks about it a lot, when he moves from one job to the next, he has a year or 2 years off. Unfortunately, financially, most of us can't afford just to take 2 years off to recharge. But that's in effect what's kind of happening in this period, is that we're all recharging our batteries, ready to go again. But I think then it will be more around where people decide to put their energy and their battery into. And I know for me, certainly, I'm looking really forward to taking some trips to see friends and that might not live around the corner, where it's really easy to commit to that relationship. But getting across to Manchester, getting down to Nottingham, getting back to, seeing my mum and dad on the Isle of Wight, for example, that's a big commitment, because it's not easy just to go around the corner and see people, and up to Scotland and see friends. So I think that's where the possibilities are really good.
Good. Great end, Gaz. And everybody else, please subscribe, please share. In the world of hockey, in the world of coaching, and we've had a phenomenal month. This week is all about world-class coaches, but at the end of this month, we've got 2 of the most important people that I think everybody will say that they're important at this moment in time. One is a member of Northumbria Police, and one is a member of the NHS. So hopefully, please, everybody watch those interviews as well. And Gaz, hopefully we will catch up soon, certainly via Zoom, but maybe on the pitch as well.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much, Graham.
Cheers, bud. Thanks.